everyone, and welcome to the University of Nottingham PGCEi webinar. My name is Helen Spiropoulos, and I'm the Admissions Manager at Stafford Associates. And joining me this evening all the way from the University of Nottingham is Dr. Rupert. Good evening to you, Dr. Rupert.
Hi, Helen, and hi to everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Yes, and I can see there's quite a lot of you that have joined us. Thank you. It's nice to have you with us. How we are going to conduct this webinar this evening is I'm just going to briefly introduce you to Stafford and what our function is here. I'm then going to hand you over to Dr. Rupert, who is going to go through the program. And at the end of the presentation, you will have the opportunity to type in any questions that you would like for Dr. Rupert or myself to answer. What I am going to be doing is grouping the questions together, simply because a lot of the questions are identical. So do look out for your question and your answer. Okay, so let's get started. Who is Stafford Associates? Well, Stafford was established in 1993, and we are a resource centre for distance learning education in the Middle East. So basically, our function here is to assist students throughout their application process. And the mere fact that you are here with us this evening means that you have been in touch with one of our experienced academic consultants. Now, we do offer a variety of programs ranging from certificates to diplomas, right through until MBAs and even doctorates. And as I said, our main function is to provide all the support in terms of collating documentation to send to the universities, and we do also offer academic and administrative assistance. I'm now going to hand you over to Dr. Rupert, and I will actually join you towards the end of the webinar. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Helen. And hello again to all of you joining us. Thanks for giving up your time tonight for this. So what I'm going to do is talk to you about hopefully a logical sequence of things. I'm going to talk a bit about the University of Nottingham in general, then more specifically the School of Education. And of course, after that, we'll talk about the PGCEi in particular. We'll talk about the background to it in terms of what we're trying to do, and we'll talk about how it's put together and structured and the things that you might expect to encounter on that course. And then we'll finish up by moving on to just a few points about how you apply and some of the dates that are involved. And at the end of everything, there's that opportunity for questions. So if there's anything you want to know that hasn't been covered, then type your questions in, and as Helen said, she's going to group those questions together, and between us we'll do our best to answer them. Okay, so the University of Nottingham in general, first of all, is one of what we call the Russell Group universities, a group of elite universities in the UK. So it has a very good reputation nationally and internationally as a university in general. And it's been rated recently with various awards. You can see on the screen here, International University of the Year. And it also has a gold-rated teaching award, which is something that's been introduced recently in this country, bronze, silver and gold standards of teaching, based largely on student feedback. So the University of Nottingham has a gold status in that respect. So, you know, it's a university that has a great reputation, and it's a university where not only research, but also the teaching is seen to be very, very strong. It's also a very international university, not just because of the large numbers of international students that we have who come here and work with us, but also because we have campuses overseas as well. So there's the University of Nottingham in China and in Malaysia. So there's a very big international dimension to what we do. So within that context, the School of Education, a bit more specifically, is a very highly regarded department. So in terms of ratings for education as a subject, in the last ranking, the University of Nottingham was ranked 3rd for research in education and 8th for education as a whole as a subject out of a huge number of different departments. So it's a department that has a reputation within education, which is known, and therefore that adds a bit of kudos to the qualifications from here. But maybe even more importantly, it's a department where the work that's done is at the forefront of what's going on. So you've got people here who are actively researching, working with not only other academics, but also with schools all over the world, and are at the forefront of what's happening. So some of the staff teaching you are people who are involved in those kind of activities, and also the materials and the ideas that feed into the course that you'll be engaging with directly are informed by all of those research-based developments. And it's a very, very long established school of education. It's been here for, in one form or another, for over 100 years. And we do all sorts of work here, including master's courses in education, and we have hundreds of teacher education students every year who are training in schools in this country, as well as things like the PGCEi. So that's a bit of the broader context about the University of Nottingham and the kind of things that we do in the School of Education. So of course you're here tonight because you're interested potentially in the PGCEi. So Postgraduate Certificate in Education International. So we'll talk a bit about what this is and what it's aiming to do. So this is a course that's been around for something like 11 years now, and it's been a real success story. So it started from very small beginnings, small numbers on a few cohorts in different countries. And we now have at any one time something like 900 or so students studying. So right now, as I speak, there'll be 900 and something students studying. Something like 4,000 have been on the course at any one time or another. And it's grown to be a course that is taught in up to 20 locations around the world. So this is an international course with a common course content, and it's taught to cohorts that are based in different places around the world. So we have cohorts in all different continents, from Asia to Africa, South America, Europe, etc. So the cohort that we're talking about in this webinar is the cohort that is what we call the Middle East cohort, but it's a cohort based in the UAE. So any educators in that kind of region in the world would tend to congregate in that cohort as a hub. And that's because, as you can see here in the first bullet point, it's what we call a blended learning program. So as well as some learning that you're going to do at a distance, it's blended with face-to-face teaching. We'll talk about that in a minute, but twice a year there are face-to-face workshops in the UAE where we will come and teach you in person. So it's a master's level course, and it's a course of academic study. It says here a course of professional enrichment specifically for educators who are working outside the UK. So it's aimed at people who are working mainly in the international school sector, in international education. And the course content and the materials are designed specifically for that kind of educator. It could be that you're working in any age range, from kindergarten to adult learners, but really anywhere that's in a sort of school type setting, we would normally say. It's important also to be clear about what the course doesn't offer or doesn't claim to offer. So this is not a course that offers you a license to teach or qualified teacher status or anything equivalent to that. So we don't assess your practice in school. Nobody is going to come and observe you doing your teaching, and we don't set you up with mentors in school who observe or assess your teaching. So this is not offering you a practical qualification. It's not saying at the end that you would necessarily be a qualified teacher. What it means to be a qualified teacher, of course, varies in every country around the world. So there isn't one single qualification that could claim that in any case. So in every country, and this is going to apply to wherever you're based, you would need to be clear about the requirements for teaching in your field. So if you're not already someone who is qualified to be a teacher, then it's important to check what's required and whether there's some licensing program, as in the UAE, for example, that you may need to go through. So this course isn't doing that for you. What it's doing is something that complements that kind of thing really, really well by giving you that kind of underpinning to what education is all about. and some of the theory that goes behind it to enrich what you do. We'll talk a bit more about that in a moment when we look at the next slide. So I mentioned this blended nature of the course where we have these face-to-face events. So for the UAE cohort, we come out to see you twice a year. We start 2 cohorts off every year. In fact, we start a cohort off in October and one in March, and we'll look a little bit later at those dates. So if we assume we're talking about the next cohort starting in October, we would be coming out to see you. So in this case, it would be a team of tutors. So it would be me and 4 colleagues. We would come out to see you right at the beginning of the course. So within usually a week or 2 of the course beginning, you have immediate input at the start. And then about halfway through the course, we come and see you again for a second workshop. Those workshops take place over weekends. So it's a hard working weekend for you. But what it means is you don't have to be coming out of school. You don't have to be worrying about seeking permission to come out of school. It's something that's done over weekends. So each of those workshops is an intensive full day of work on the Friday and the Saturday. So at those workshops, clearly you have input from us as University of Nottingham staff. All of the people who come are University of Nottingham tutors. We've got a great team of people, and they include people with all kinds of backgrounds. My background, for example, is in primary education. So I used to be a primary teacher. We've got people who are in secondary education. We've got people who've been head teachers or advisors for the government, etc. So all of these people bring with them a wealth of experience of actually teaching in schools, as well as the work they now do for the university. And at those face-to-face workshops, we obviously induct you into the course in terms of the materials and the ways of working and all of the things you can expect. So those practical details that you might be worried about. But we don't want it to be a purely functional set of instructions about here's what to do. We want the workshop to be enriching. So we also focus on some of the big ideas. So whatever the modules are at that stage of the course, we'll be trying to introduce you to some of those big ways of thinking, some of the theorists, some of the big ideas, and try and challenge your thinking and your assumptions. And I think the other purpose of those workshops, which is equally important, is that it's a chance for you to network with other professionals. So all of us, when we work in schools, easily get sucked into a kind of bubble of just being in our own particular environment. And it's quite hard to sometimes understand what goes on in different schools and maybe very different types of school. So we have educators on these courses from all kinds of schools. So there might be British curriculum, American curriculum, IB curriculum, SABIS curriculum, all kinds of very, very diverse schools. And of course, all of you as potential students bring your own educational backgrounds to bear as well. So what's great about the workshops is we put you into groups that are mixed. We aim to have 100 people starting on a cohort in October, and we put you into smaller groups for most of that workshop time where you're with a tutor, where you're in a group of up to 20. So for instance, I would have 20 of those students myself, and that means that I'm going to get to know them and they're going to get to know me, and I'll be the person they liaise with throughout the year, which is really nice because we've all met. But also you get to know your fellow students in that group really well. So we do a lot of collaboration and work where you're getting ideas from each other and sharing your practices. So you'll learn an awful lot from one another about the ways that things work in different schools and different age phases as well. So you get that real mixture, which you almost never get through other forms of professional development. So that's a really important thing there. So the third point on this slide really is about, what we're trying to achieve with the course. I already said that it's not a course that is going to teach you how to do the teaching in a practical sense. We're not assessing that, but we are having an impact, I hope, on practice by getting you to think differently. We're going to get you to look at the things that you do every day in the classroom with new eyes, with a new perspective, and to understand them differently, and to question the kind of assumptions you might have about education and how things are done. So we're going to broaden your horizons, I hope, and give you a lot of new ideas. And I often say to people that, I've experienced this myself. So when I was working in school as a primary teacher, I did a master's level course. So I did an MA in education. And in a similar way, even though that course never came physically into my school, no tutors came in, nobody came to observe what I did, it absolutely transformed my thinking, and it gave me a whole new outlook on my practice, and it really improved what I did day to day. It wasn't because someone came in and showed me how to do something, it was because it changed my thinking and opened my mind. So that's what we hope that you're going to have. You're going to have that kind of enriching experience. So we'll have a little look at how the course is structured here. So the good news, if you're thinking of starting this course in October, for example, is that every few years the course gets revamped and updated, and we update all of the materials and resources, and we're just finishing that process right now. So any cohort starting from September onwards will be working on a new version of the course, brand new version, where everything has just been updated. And so a cohort that we're talking about here in the UAE starting in October will be one of the first globally to have this new version updated. So that will be a really exciting time. It'll mean everything we use, the videos, the readings, all of the things you're going to work through will have been reviewed and brought fully up to date. So the course is structured over, we call it a year's course. In practice, really, you're going to be working on this from the very beginning of October, if you start in October, through to July. So perhaps it's more like 10 months of work over that year's period. And it's structured into 3 equally weighted modules. So these modules are all compulsory. You don't get to choose which module you do. But within each of those modules, you can choose some of the different activities and units that you study. So you can tailor the content within a given module to your own setting. So you might be a secondary phase teacher of maths. You might be a kindergarten teacher. You might be a primary homeroom teacher. You could be any kind of educator with any age phase, and you can choose units that will apply to you. And also you can tailor your assignments, which we'll talk about in a minute, to your own context as well. So you can really, really personalize this course. So each of those modules is worth 20 credits, and time-wise, you'll spend about 1/3 of the time on each of those. The modules are designed to take you on a kind of journey, so there's a logical sequence here. So the first module, for example, is all about what education is for. So taking that specifically international educator context, we look at international education and we ask what that means, because if you stop to think about it, when you say international school, what does that mean? It could mean all kinds of different things. Does it mean that all the pupils, the students, are from different countries? Does it mean the staff need to be? Does it mean that it's about the curriculum being international somehow? There's all kinds of ways of defining international schooling. So we look at international education, but more broadly as well, what is education for? Is education simply to give students the opportunity to achieve high grades and go on and get great jobs? Or is education about educating a whole person and making them into a fulfilled human being? Or is education about providing a workforce for the country, and so on? So there's a lot of different ways that you can look at what education is trying to do. And often we don't stop to think about this in our daily life, working in schools. So the first module is all about that. The second module, following on from asking why we're doing this education, what we're trying to achieve, is about how we do it. So the second module is about understanding learning. How do students learn? What do we know about that? What are the different perspectives and ideas on that? And therefore also, how do we as educators therefore teach? What are some of the different strategies and the forms of practice that we can follow? So again, as I say, you'll be tailoring that very much to your age phase, your context, and researching and looking into the kind of practices that you use. And then having asked in module 1, therefore, what education is all about, what it's for, in module 2, how we do this, module 3 is about you inquiring into educational practice. What we mean by that is that we hand over even more ownership to you and ask you to undertake a small piece of research in your own context, whatever that educational setting might be, where you can explore an aspect of education that is of interest to you and find out something. It could be, for example, that you're finding out about how students understand what you've actually taught them. So you get a chance to have a look at something that interests you. Each of those modules is assessed by a 4,000 word piece of work. Often that's something that some people find daunting and they think, well, I haven't studied for a long time, I'm coming back to education perhaps, or maybe I've studied in a different country, or I studied in a different subject area, different discipline, so I'm not used to writing about this kind of thing. So we're aware of that, and so we do a lot of work with you through the face-to-face workshops, especially the first one, but also through the materials that you're going to access on the course to try and structure that up for you and provide you with some support. So we look at past assignments, we look at ways of academic writing, we look at the assessment criteria very closely. And there's a process that you go through with your tutor that you've been assigned to, which supports you through, for example, each assignment, you have the opportunity to submit a proposal for the assignment. So you're going to be telling your tutor, following a form that you fill out, how you intend to go about your assignment, what you're going to cover, and what resources you're going to use, what you're going to be reading, and your tutor feeds back on that and gives you advice. And for the first module, because you're coming into something new, you also have the opportunity to submit a draft of the full assignment, get a lot of feedback on that from your tutor, and then you can work on that before you submit your final version. So we give you a lot of structure to help you with those assignments. This PGCEi course, you can look at in two ways. It may be that it's just a particular qualification that you want to do for a year, and it may be something you feel you need to do professionally. Maybe it's good for your CV, your resume, or perhaps you're doing it through more intrinsic motivation because you just find this really interesting. And like me, when I did my MA in education, it's just something you want to do. You can look at that as something in its own right. You get your postgraduate certificate, you get your qualification, you get to come to Nottingham if you want to, for a graduation ceremony even, if you choose to do that. Or you can look at this as the beginning of a journey. So actually what you're doing here, getting your 60 credits, as long as they're all passed at master's level, you will be, at the end of this, you'll have the equivalent of a third of a master's degree in education. So you would have the first third of an MA in education, and you can transfer those credits and use them and then pick up and carry on with an MA in education. You've got a third of it completed, a third of it done and paid for. So if you want to do that, you can do that and follow that up with us, which we're always delighted if people do. You can either transfer all of your credits and have a third of the MA in education, or if you want to follow one of our more specialist routes, like special needs or leadership and management, for example, then you're probably transferring just 30 of those credits. The second point on this slide reminds me to tell you that all of the materials you need for the course are provided as part of the course online. So you're not going to have to go out and buy books. You're not going to have access to physical university library. You access the course through our VLE, which is on the Moodle platform. Some people may have worked with Moodle. It's similar to other VLEs used in education like Blackboard and other setups. That gives you access to all of the course materials. So you have all of the readings to do in all of the modules, all of the video and audio resources that we offer to you, all of that's available there. And you also have access to the electronic library here at the University of Nottingham. So you have access to thousands of ebooks, and lots of those are linked through our course materials. You can click on the link, it takes you to the library website, and you can read that book online. And also all of the academic journals that you can access without having to pay any extra fee. So all of those materials are available online. You've also, as a resource, of course, got your tutor. So I mentioned that I would have up to 20 students in each cohort, and the same with my colleagues. So your tutor who you've met, and I think that's really important that this is somebody who you've actually seen face to face and worked with at the beginning of the course. Your tutor is there for you if you've got inquiries where you want to email something with a question. You can request a tutorial. So you can have a tutorial through some video platform like Skype, or if you're in an area where Skype's not available, we can try different platforms, or we can simply have telephone tutorials. But we're there to support you and deal with those kind of things. And it also mentions here the fact you have group discussions. So I talked before about the power of your peer group and that networking that you have with your fellow students. And at various points in the course, you are required to post ideas and responses to tasks online in forums, and you get to interact and read the other students' input. So you can read what other people have written in response to perhaps a small piece of reading or an idea in education, and you can engage with what they've written and write responses and get into conversations. And at times we have what we call the global forum as well, where those things go into not only a discussion area that's from the UAE cohort, but actually from the cohorts all over the world. So you may be getting into a discussion with someone who's studying in Nigeria, for example, or in Peru, talking about some of the same issues. And that's a really fascinating thing to do if you think of yourself as an international educator. So we'll talk a little bit now about how to get onto the course. You can find a lot of this information on our website, of course, but just to summarize, this is a postgraduate certificate. So the normal expectation is that you are a graduate, you have your bachelor's degree with usually second-class honours. Sometimes there are people, however, who have extensive professional experience working in education over many, many years and have perhaps attained other qualifications. So if you have a lot of other experience or qualifications, you don't have that bachelor's degree, it's worth having a look and with your academic consultant at Stafford and considering making an application anyway, because we do sometimes look at alternative routes in, and we may be able to value and accept other things you have in place of that bachelor's. But the standard profile is the bachelor's degree. It mentions here also that because the course is taught in English, there may be, if English isn't your first language, or you haven't been educated in English, that your education wasn't in the language of English, you may have to do your IELTS qualification. And you can see there the kind of levels that we're talking about. This is probably something that's obvious, but you need to be an educator. That could mean all kinds of things. So some people who come onto the course are working as teachers in any age range. Some people are working as teaching assistants, learning support assistants, that kind of thing. We have a lot of people who are in that kind of role. Or in fact, you may be actually just volunteering in a school. All of these are possible, but you need to have day-to-day access to a classroom. And that's not because anyone's going to be judging your teaching. We've already talked about that. But it's because the tasks that you do as part of your coursework that you submit and the things you're going to need to write about in your assignments will require you to be talking about real things in the classroom. And that's a real strength of this course, because although it's an academic course, it's a master's level, everything is keyed into you reflecting on real things that you do day to day. So you need to have access to a classroom where you can actually have a context to write about. And of course, you need access to a computer and the internet for your study there. The second point here is something we've already mentioned, which is about considering on a case-by-case basis any non-standard applications. These are some of the materials that you need. So I won't go through all of this list here. That's probably fairly self-explanatory. Just talking about the third point there about the personal statement. Do give some thought to that. Really talk to us about your motivation for doing the course. What is it that really interests you and drives you to do this? Tell us, of course, about your educational background, what you're doing at the moment, the experience that you have. But also don't forget to tell us about the other things that may be relevant. So sometimes people on the course are career changers. They've done other professions before moving into education. and they sometimes don't value their own experiences enough. But you would, in that case, bring with you a lot of qualities. You'd bring time management, for example, and perhaps communication skills, all sorts of things that are very relevant for education. So don't be shy and too humble about those kind of things. And if you are applying and you are one of those non-standard applicants, not a very nice way to put it perhaps, but somebody who doesn't fit that usual profile, then that kind of statement where you really explain how you think you're equipped for the course is even more important. And equally, the other thing I draw out here is your reference that you supply. So think about who is best placed to write your reference, not just somebody who's going to say nice things about you, but somebody who can offer an educational perspective. It might be somebody working in education who's able to comment on your experience as a professional, but also somebody perhaps who can comment on your readiness to do this level of academic work and the personal qualities that you show in terms of commitment and organisation and so on that are going to be helpful. So some final details then. We've talked about the fact we have 2 cohorts starting each year. We have a cohort starting in October and one in March. So we're thinking today mainly about this next cohort, which starts in October. So October, right now, I guess most of you are kind of sweltering in some summer heat. October might seem a long way away, but it's going to come around very, very soon. So you can see the program commences on the 1st of October. So we'd urge you to get your applications in as soon as possible. And Helen will probably confirm this, but I think the date that we're looking at really is to get things in by about the 20th of August. So that's not too far away. And places on each cohort are limited. We tend to have a lot of uptake, especially for this October cohort every year. That's grown each year. And we have a strict limit of 100 places and we can't go above that. So it really pays to get your application in as soon as possible. You can see there the dates for the workshops. So if you were starting on that 1st of October cohort, the face-to-face sessions, you can see the first one is only about 10 days after you've begun. You'll meet your tutors and your fellow students for the first time. And then another one takes place about halfway through your study. You can see here also the fees that are due there. And that's something that you'll handle through Stafford. So that brings us to the end of all of the slides and things I was going to explain to you. I guess there may be some questions though and things you want to follow up on. So as we said, I'll do my best to answer, and Helen may be able to answer some things as well. So I'll hand you over to Helen now.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Rupert. Very informative as usual. So let's actually get going through all the questions. Chantal's question is, she's currently a volunteer, a teaching volunteer at her son's school. And in your opinion, how many hours or days would I need at the school to be seen as contact classroom hours?
Okay, so that's a good question. So we don't specify a number of hours, and we're not going to be checking up on that. So that, you know, there is no set rule about that, no figure we're going to put on it. I think it just needs to be that you have fairly flexible access to classrooms as a volunteer in that case. So at different times in the year, you will need to be maybe observing some lessons. You might be needing to reflect on the work you do with some of the students. You might need to actually do some teaching with even just a small group of students and to think about that and write about that. But those things will come just at certain times. So there isn't an answer that is in the sense of a certain number of hours a week. There will be some weeks when you don't need to be in the classroom at all. So I think the best thing is if you're able to negotiate a reasonably flexible arrangement where when you need to be, you can go into the classroom. And that will really be in the second and third of those 3 modules most of all. But that's how I would put it to you rather than thinking of a particular figure. Having said that, the more you can be in school, I think the more relevant you're going to find the content. And as you read about some of the theoretical ideas, having a context on which to hang some of these thoughts is always really useful, and I think it brings them to life and helps you to understand. So really, the more time you can spend in school in that sense, the better.
Okay, and is having a high GPA important in getting into the program? For example, I have 3.64 out of 4. Is that important to get into the program?
No, we're not really looking at that kind of thing, and we will be looking chiefly at your degree, and as we said before, just looking particularly for people who are usually graduates and have usually second-class degree or above. So we're not really getting into looking at people's GPAs. If you think that is a selling point though, and you've particularly succeeded academically by whatever kind of metric, then that's something you might want to add to your personal statement. It's a good selling point, but that's not one of the things that we are specifically measuring.
Okay, and just to answer Moxine's question, yes, this particular webinar is being recorded, and you will be able to receive the recording tomorrow or the day after. Okay. All right, a very important question that does come up quite often. What is the difference between the PGCEi and the PG Cert or the PGCE?
Okay, yeah, it does get very confusing, doesn't it? There are lots of different courses that all sound quite similar. Sometimes when people talk about a PGCE, what they're talking about is a qualification that happens in the UK in particular, and more specifically, usually in England and Wales. So in England, a PGCE course is normally a 1-year full-time course where students study full-time. They do the academic content of a course, very similar to the kind of things we've been talking about today, but simultaneously they go on placements in school and they're assessed on their practical teaching as well. And so at the end of that year on a PGCE course, they would typically be awarded the PGCE qualification, the academic part, and also qualified teacher status, which is the professional part. So they're doing 2 things at once. The difference we're talking about here is that we are talking about the academic side only. So as mentioned before, we're not looking at assessing your practice. Most of our students are working while they study, so they're not full-time students. They are people who are studying part-time, and so there's a difference as well. But the crucial thing is, if you hear people talking about PGCE and they've come from the UK, that's almost a shorthand for saying they've also got qualified teacher status, and that's not the case with this course.
Okay, and a popular question is, will the degree certificate have online distance learning mention on it, or will the transcript have the same?
No, so your certificate won't say that. So sometimes people are concerned about that because they perceive there to be maybe a reason why employers might not accept a distance learning qualification, for example. So no, you can rest assured that it does not say that.
Okay, and this is also an interesting question. I do have a master's in computer science. Will this program help me to work as a computer science teacher in secondary?
Well, I think this will complement that really nicely. So the good news for you is you will be used to working already at that level. I think you'll find lots of things to adapt to, actually, because this is very much a social science kind of subject to study. So the assignments and things and the way of writing and working may be very different from your computer science course. In terms of your employability, to be clear again, this isn't going to be something that qualifies you to be a computer science teacher, but you would be able to tailor all of that content I mentioned earlier towards computer science. So you could write about and study units that were related to perhaps secondary age phase and computer science as a subject. So in a way, you would be studying that specific part of education in great depth through the year. So I think that's a great offering for any employer. I think it's something that you can certainly say enhances your employment opportunities. But we, of course, stop short of saying, and therefore you're qualified to be that teacher.
Okay, and it's about 3 or 4 questions pertaining to the workshops. I'm just going to group them together. I do understand that the workshops are mandatory. However, what would happen if I cannot attend a session? Will I be able to catch up, or will the material be available on online portal?
Yeah, so the workshops, you're right, they're mandatory workshops and you must attend as part of the course. And the reason we say that really is because it's quite difficult to be successful on the course without coming. There's a lot to take in on a course like this, as you can imagine, and it's really important to have that input and guidance from tutors in order to be successful. So the first part of my answer would be to say, if you know that the dates you've just seen in October, for example, for the first workshop, I think they were the 11th and 12th from memory, if you know that that's going to be a problem or could be a problem, we would ask you to defer your entry and start in March instead. So just 6 months later, start then. So you first of all, the answer is you need to start at a time when you know you can commit to those dates. However, with the best intentions, we know life sometimes gets in the way of things, doesn't it? And if you are partway through the course and, for example, something terrible happened in terms of, illness or some big unforeseen thing, and you couldn't come to the second workshop, if you're able to provide evidence to support why you're unable to attend, then we would want to work with you. We're not just going to say, right, that's it, you're off the course, you're finished. Well, we would work with you. We do have, you asked about catching up with things, and we do have some of the slides and things that we put onto the VLE, onto Moodle afterwards for you to see. I don't think that would constitute catching up on its own, though, because so much of what we do is based around discussion and talking to other people that the presentations can't capture most of that. But we would get you to get in touch with your tutor. Your tutor could hopefully have some kind of online tutorial with you and work with you to bring you up to speed. But so the answer is we can work around that. However, that needs to be a really exceptional case that is something unforeseen.
Okay, and Sarah's question is, when is the most intense part of the course in terms of research and deadlines? In other words, which month do I have to submit that very last module?
Okay, so I guess it varies. It's quite a difficult question to answer because it depends how people work. Some people like to work steadily, doing a little bit each day. Other people do it in intensive bursts. You can think, we don't have the dates for next year and the assignments set at this point, but you can imagine that period of time from October through to probably about the first week of July, and think of that almost in thirds, and then you can sort of imagine whereabouts the end of each module might fall. So typically, people tend to perhaps find the first module the challenging one in terms of getting used to things. So you might want to have some real time to focus there. And to answer your question about when things finish with the final assignment, that probably would be about the first week of July. That tends to be one of the probably the easiest ones in terms of deadlines, because most of the people we're working with have finished school by then. So although you've been working during the final weeks of the school year and you've been gathering information from the classroom, by the time you come to write the assignment, it's probably just the start of your summer holidays, and therefore perhaps there's a little bit more time and you're not in the classroom working. So that's probably the best answer I can give in terms of how the year pans out that way.
Okay, and Noura's got an interesting question. I'm considering a career shift. I don't have experience in a classroom per se, but I do hold a PhD in anatomy, and I do have 7 years experience in teaching undergraduate medical university students. Would this course be any benefit for me to move into a different career path?
Well, it's really hard to make any great guarantees, of course, about employment in particular regions. So I can't say anything for definite. But from what you say there about your background, that sounds to me like an excellent profile to bring into education. Before I was a school teacher, I worked in a different profession altogether. So I changed career myself, and I think I was able to bring lots of attributes from a different profession and sell those to potential employers. And I think it adds a bit of value probably. And the fact that you've got this qualification up to PhD level is fantastic, of course. And the fact that you've also done some teaching to adult students, I think is also something that's really, really beneficial. And I think what this course then would give you is more of the way of applying that background to a school context. So whatever age group you think you might want to teach in, this will give you a sense of how schools work. It'll give you a sense of how children more specifically learn, and some of the ideas about teaching that go on in a school context. And probably by the sound of it, those are the things that you would be less familiar with at this stage. So I think this course could be of great benefit. And personally speaking, I think you have a lot to sell at the end of it.
And if I was to relocate to the UK in the future, is there a specific time frame in one should have to obtain your QTS?
So if you wanted to teach in UK schools, most of them would ask you to have QTS, qualified teacher status. Not all of them. It's worth noting the private school sector has the freedom to employ people who are not qualified, and some categories of public school, state school do as well. However, even in those sectors, most people would expect you to have that QTS. What you can do is, if you've got at least 2 years experience of teaching and you don't have QTS, so if you are, for instance, teaching in the UAE or somewhere else, and you're coming to the UK, you can get a job as an unqualified teacher or teaching assistant, and you can then do what we call the assessment only route into QTS. So that's a pathway. It's not something University of Nottingham offers, but lots and lots of providers all over the country here offer this. And really what happens is you are assessed on the job, and usually in the space of a term, so relatively quickly, you build up a portfolio of various bits of evidence, and you get observed a certain number of times, and an external assessor comes in to see you, and you can be awarded your QTS on that basis. So that normally would involve you getting some employment as an unqualified teacher in some form, and then doing that on the job and it could be within a term. So it's worth looking at the UK government website. So if you just Googled assessment only QTS, you'll go to one of the gov.uk websites there, and they'll have general information about that. And that's the kind of thing we can talk to you about in more detail if you come on to the workshops and you're liaising with tutors.
Okay, I've noticed that there are 3 modules, therefore I'm assuming that there are only 3 assignments to be submitted. Are there any other assessments besides that I need to submit?
So you're right, there are 3 assignments. So the graded work that builds up to your final outcome, which could be pass, merit, or distinction, that is based on those 3 assignments. There are some other submissions that you make. Some of them are technically voluntary, but we would absolutely advise you to do them, like the assignment proposals that I mentioned and the draft of the first assignment. There's also one other category of work, which is what we call process work. And process work is really just you keeping a record of your response to the tasks in each module. So as you work through the materials, at various points, you'll be instructed to write a brief response to something and to log some work that you've done. And you build that up on a particular document, and then at a certain point in each module, you submit that to us. So that is compulsory. It's not something graded, so it doesn't affect your outcome, but it is a piece of work that you submit. And that enables us to give you feedback on the big ideas of that module, so that you have some guidance then that can lead you towards your assignment.
Okay, and I'm a very busy working mom, and I do have quite a lot of work on my plate. how many hours should I dedicate to this program per week in order to pass it successfully?
Yeah, so this is a very common question, and understandably so, because when people are busy professionals and you have busy family life, you always wonder if you can take something else on. So what we would say is everybody varies, but on average, you might expect that this would work out to be about 12 hours a week. So for some people, that might be doing a little bit every day. For other people, it might be having a concentrated block of time, like an entire day at the weekend or something like that, or some kind of combination of both. There will be up and down times. It's going to be fairly intense through the year, but there will be weeks, of course, where you do less and weeks where you might do more to make up for it. Everybody works in different ways, and it can seem daunting, to think, wow, 12 hours, that sounds like a lot. It may be that you are somebody, if that's an average, maybe you're going to do things a bit more quickly. But also what I would say is that we've got hundreds and hundreds of students from just this cohort, this region of the PGCEi alone, who have been working often full-time or with other commitments, family commitments and so on. And that everybody understandably worries about this, but almost everybody is able to complete the course and is able to do that. And I know how this feels. When I did my MA in education, I was working full-time in school, and I had 2 children at the time. So I've been through that kind of situation. I understand how it is to manage your time, but it is doable. But if you want to have a rough figure in mind, I would talk about 12 hours.
Okay, and I'm just going to answer the question on IELTS because I see there's quite a few of them that have asked the same question. It's very important, if you have completed an IELTS academic, that you have completed it in the past year. If it's older than a year, unfortunately the university will not accept that. And also the university will not accept an IELTS general. It has to be an IELTS academic with a score of 6.5. Okay, do get in touch with your academic consultant and staff, and we can give you a bit more details on that as well. Okay. I believe this is a year course. So if I start in October, am I expected to graduate in October of the following year?
Yeah, broadly speaking, that's what you could do. So your work will be finished in early July. Then, of course, there's some time where it's being marked and so on. And it would be, if you wanted to come to a graduation ceremony, then the ceremony you'd be invited to would actually be in December of the following year, because we have graduation twice a year, and you wouldn't be ready in time for the July ceremony. It would be the December ceremony. So if you want to come to the UK in person and come to Nottingham, and every year some students do that, which is great, because it usually falls just after people have broken up for a school holiday around that kind of period in December. If not, what you can do is you can choose to graduate at a distance, if you like. So just have your documentation sent to you, and that would tend to happen in about October. So that would be the time when you would get your actual certificate and so on.
Okay, and Chantal has got questions on accommodation, when I can see there's quite a few have got the same, so I'll just answer that. Chantal, yes, accommodation would have to be sorted out yourself. However, do get in touch with your academic consultant so we can give you the details of the hotel where we will be having the workshops. And our administrator will also be able to give you more guidance on that as well. Workshops normally start at 9 a.m. And go right through until about 4 p.m. Obviously, there's breaks in between. But do get in touch with your academic consultant, and we can definitely give you more details on the wonderful hotel that we have these workshops.
And we feed you really well. So
yeah. Okay. Sorry, I'm just going through all these questions. I'm just trying to group them all together. Okay, so I can see there's questions with regards to the classroom access. Your classroom access can be at any level, so whether it is preschool or nursery or secondary, as long as you do have that classroom access, which is imperative as part of the program. Okay, so there's no specific level that you have to have access to. Okay, right. Again, it's also how important is the workshop. And can you perhaps just tell us briefly of what is covered in this workshop? And should I be bringing any additional materials with me at the workshop?
Yeah, well, you certainly don't need to bring any materials with you. I mean, it's worth bringing, for example, things like a laptop. You might want to access things online, but you don't need to bring anything else with you that relates to your job or anything. And we cover, as I touched on before, really, we cover various different, well, there are various different aims. So we aim to make you as clear as possible about how the course works, how to navigate around the VLE, the site that you're going to use for all your course materials, how things work with the things you need to submit, what we're looking for in assignments, all of those kind of things, that functional side of studying that you need to get to grips with. So there's input around that, including academic writing, but there's also input on the big ideas that we're talking about. So there will be sort of taught input from the tutors and activities and so on, which are about the big ideas underlying the modules. So we get you thinking, we try and challenge you a little bit in terms of your thinking and open up your mind to certain possibilities and ideas maybe you haven't seen. And then we also engineer that opportunity for you to mix in with other students. So the venue that we use at the moment is really ideal for this because we have groups of up to 20, each with their own tutor. But at other times, there's a couple of times in each workshop where we bring the whole group together, so usually 100 people, and we can have a bigger input in a larger room. And every time we have a break or lunch, that's always in a communal area where everybody's all together. So you get a chance to mingle in with a huge number of people. So those are the kind of aims that we have for those workshops. And they're usually really tiring but enjoyable weekends. And I think you go away feeling quite stimulated and that you'll have met some new friends, some new colleagues, and really got to know your tutor as well.
Okay, and I'm just going to finish off the last bunch of questions, which are all the same or related to local certification and attestation. Every country in this region does have its own rules and regulations, so we really do advise that you get in touch with your relevant authorities to actually ascertain what is required for attestation and certification of the program. Okay, so do get in touch with your academic consultant at Stafford and we'll be able to give you more details on that as well. Okay, right, so I've managed to actually group all the questions together. Thank you so much. The very informative questions as well. As Dr. Rupert has said, we only accept 100 students on this coming cohort. At the moment, we only have 41 places available. So I really do advise that you get in touch with your academic consultant and start sending those application documents to us. Again, thank you so much, Dr. Rupert. It was wonderful having you with us this evening. And thank you to all for attending.
Okay, well, thanks, Helen. See you soon. And thanks to everybody here. Hopefully I'll see some of you soon as well. It'd be great if some of you were there in October with us. So good luck with your application.
Okay, good evening to you all.